Hey there, my friends. Today I would like to talk about resolving the disease of perfectionism. I am infected. I want to make that clear here and now. Perfectionism. I'd ask you, in what way are you a perfectionist? And if you at all identify with it, wonderful. And if you don't, you're probably too perfect to identify with it, so you might want to click off this video now. And as this little JP jab at you, but as we take a look at actually resolving perfectionism, I do truly believe it's a dis-ease. It's perfectionism is a symptom that comes from something that is really not at ease inside of us. And I will also say, I don't think there is a perfect way to resolve perfectionism. I know right away all us perfectionists think, resolving perfectionism, let's do it the right way, the perfect way. No, we want to be careful that we don't drive ourselves deeper into the disease while brainwashing ourselves to believe we're actually curing the disease. There is no perfect way to cure perfectionism. Taking a breath with that, coming to terms with it, it's probably the first step to resolving some perfectionism. And I think resolving perfectionism, it's also not a black and white, I'll make it completely go away, then it's resolved. I think that's the perfectionist in us having its delusional perspective. I think resolving perfectionism has to do with allowing ourselves to be less perfect and therefore more of ourselves. I think perfectionism, I'll give you a couple definitions here. I think it's a severe form of constipation, mostly that expresses psychologically. And I think what's constipated is our natural self, our authentic self. That's kind of a buzzword. I use it almost every video. That seems perfect of me to do. So that stuff doesn't come out when we're busy being the perfectionist. Something else of what a perfectionist is to me is it's a form of hyper control over how other people perceive us and or how we perceive us. We're in an immense amount of control trying to influence how other people or ourself sees us. So challenge number one to myself that I'm going to talk at you because I need to hear it and take the challenge up is us perfectionists do our best to learn how people perceive us, not control how they perceive us. Yikes. Do we really have control over how people perceive us? I would say mostly not. But I don't think perfectionism is grounded in any kind of reality other than our own imagination. So perfectionism, I believe, is mostly about giving ourselves the perception of control over controlling how other people perceive us or controlling how part of us perceives another part of us. So doing our best to become the curious student of life. I want to learn how someone perceives me. I want to be able to accept when they see my sloppiness, cool. When they see my brilliance, cool. When they see me in a way that I am just not that, but they're just seeing me through their delusional perspective, cool. That is relaxation. Perfectionism, it's constipation, it's constriction. I'm not going to let them see that crap of me. Or I'm not going to let them see my brilliance because that's somehow threatening to me. So that's maybe a first challenge to us. And something else I'd ask you to consider about perfectionism and where it comes from. I believe perfectionism is it's a symptom of us needing to be hyper-controlled, as I mentioned, and I believe needing to be hyper-controlled is a symptom of fear or shame, those two core shadow emotions, shame and fear. And when we're a perfectionist, I don't think it's because we're feeling our shame and fear. I think it's because we have it, and we become a perfectionist because we're very unwilling to feel it. So we construct these perfectionist ideals, whatever yours are. There's a million ways to be a perfectionist. None of them are perfect, by the way. So we construct our perfectionist ideals all as boundaries to not touch our own fear and shame. Why? Because I believe once upon a time, deep in the life of all of us perfectionists, we experienced something, whether it was an event that was acute or a chronic experience that recurred over and over. We experienced something that really threatened us, that made us feel very out of control. Not like being on a roller coaster and out of control is a good thing, but a level of being out of control that really threatened us, shook us to our core, whether it was someone beating us, or someone psychologically overwhelming us, or someone emotionally disconnecting from us, or it was an immense amount of helplessness, or it was being bullied at school, or it was bullying people at school, not knowing how to feel good about yourself otherwise. So deep in our hearts, perfectionist hearts, we experienced something that made us feel incredibly threatened about being out of control. So thus the seed of the perfectionist began to germinate. And our compensation for our fright or shame about being out of control is, of course, engineered to defend us from ever feeling that level of fear or shame about being out of control again. So in other words, the fear and shame that we still carry inside of us as perfectionists, that's what we're trying to prevent in the future by being a perfectionist. That's what we're trying to prevent present day. The irony is we're defending against what we already have inside of us. So I would just ask you, whatever your version of perfectionism is, if you let down that facade for a moment and let people see something else, a sloppy you, how would you feel about yourself having other people and you see the sloppy you, the out of control you? As you think about your answer, let me give you one of my quick examples. One of my perfectionisms is I remain very stoic and balanced. It's not true balance, it's perfectionist illusion of balance. So in other words, I very rarely let myself emotionally react because I don't think it's perfect to emotionally react. So when I ask myself, okay, if I let that perfectionism facade go for a moment and I imagine I get emotionally reactive, I get angry at someone, I even say a naughty word in the heat of the moment at someone or at myself, whatever, how would that make me feel? Okay. I imagine I would feel embarrassed. And I imagine I'd be ashamed of myself for being temperamental and out of control, acting like a bratty kid. I have that bratty kidness inside of me. My perfectionist, of course, constipates it and strangulates my bowels of expression. So there's that embarrassment and that shame that I'm constantly trying to avoid. So my step, and I would ask you to consider what your version of this step is to feel what we're constantly trying to avoid. So I need to come to terms and work on feeling that embarrassment and shame that would get provoked if I got emotionally reactive. Otherwise, I'll always be compensating to avoid it through being a perfectionist, which costs me a lot of my naturalness, a lot of my realness. And I think it also robs that from other people that are in my life. They don't get to see a lot of me. But what your version of that is, what your feelings are, what you imagine you would feel if you dropped your perfectionist facade, that's something I think you and I really need to work on feeling. Imagine it first, feel it, and then I would dare task you and I with the mission number 2 or 3, whatever, if you're keeping count. Apparently not a good perfectionist right now. Is we work on letting that happen in the 3-dimensional expression in our life. So one of the things I'm working on is when I get emotionally reactive is to actually let that be expressed. I'm not talking be emotionally violent or any garbage like that. But when I'm upset, actually letting that be expressed and visible. Let myself feel it. Let myself know it. And even more dangerously, let my girlfriend see it. Let her feel it. Because that emotional reaction, I do so much constricting to just keep that suppressed. And I don't think that does anything other than kill me. Parts of me anyway, slowly. So I'd ask you to challenge yourself. I think one of the principal illusions of a perfectionist is my brilliance is found in my perfection. I would dare say absolutely not. I think your comfort is found in your perfection. I think your brilliance, your real gifts, your talents are found in your imperfection, are found when you're being out of control. They're found in the squiggly lines, if you will. Our perfectionism, metaphorically, it's all about straight lines. Everything's perfect. But the brilliance of you, I think, is found when you are sloppy, the squiggly line. What do I mean by squiggly line? Last year I was teaching a workshop in London, and a lovely young lady shared an Alan Watts perspective, which I'll throw at you real quick here. The wisdom of nature, I think, is a great teacher. So what she pointed out that Alan Watts points out that I'm pointing out to you, and you can point it out to your friends, 10th hand information is always the best. Nature doesn't do straight lines. It only does squiggly lines. I think there's a brilliance of nature that all of us can really use some nourishment to drink in from. You know what I mean? There are no straight lines in nature. You go up to a tree, you say, the tree's straight. No, it's not. You go up to it. The bark is wavy. It's never in a perfectly straight line. Grass never grows perfectly straight. It's always some degree of wavy, squiggly lines. Anything that's a perfectly straight line is manufactured by a human being. I don't think everything manufactured by a human being is necessarily bad, but I don't think it's necessarily good either. I think there is great wisdom getting back to nature and really embodying those principles that nature shows. Trying to have everything a straight line inside and outside of you, the perfectionist, I think it's truly you swimming against the current of life, of the life that wants to live through you. And you might say, well, JP, salmon do it. They're pretty cool animals. It also kills salmon. They die after they swim against the current. So with that said, my perfectly imperfect perfectionist friends, be the squiggly line.